Hey everyone, and thank you for joining us at the Orange Table Talk. This is our first episode of a series that we're going to be doing to have important conversations about pressing issues that are taking place on our campus. This is going to be in partnership with the Office of Communications and Marketing, and each video is going to be housed on the belong.utk.edu website. Our ultimate goal with these conversations is to start a dialogue and to create a better understanding of who we are as volunteers and the different members we have on our campus. My name is Dalton. I'm a senior and I'm studying agriculture communications, and I'm from Lebanon, Tennessee.
Hi, my name is Maddie Stevens. I'm from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm a senior studying English. And as Dalton said, this topic is going to be challenging, but this conversation is one we need to have. We as students will be discussing the Black student experience at UTK and the impact that events like the Blackface Snapchat photo have on our campus and our community. Here at the table are students all ready to have this dialogue and talk about ways that we as a volunteer family can do better. We have Carmen, a sophomore from Arkansas studying English, and Fife, a first-year student from Memphis studying accounting.
Also at the table we have a junior whose name is Garrett. He's studying kinesiology. He's also from Memphis. And we also have Cora, a senior who is studying psychology from Atlanta. To kind of start everything off, I just wanted to ask each of you how you're feeling. And I know that might be a loaded question. It might be filled with emotion, which is okay. But 2 Thursdays ago, when that blackface picture was posted, what did you think and what have you thought since then?
Well, the first emotion I got was sad. I was honestly sad. I was hurt that something like that could even happen now. Because oftentimes, as a Black student on campus, I haven't been face to face with something like that before. I've seen it, on TV, civil rights movement, that type of thing. And I looked at it as something of the past, and I want it to be something of the past, but the reality is it's not. It's something very real today, racism and prejudice people. So the first emotion I felt was sad.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think initially my first thought that I was disappointed, but I was not surprised by it. Being an Africana Studies minor, we come up with those images pop up all the time with blackface. And with the climate of today and pretty much since 2016, I would say I've seen a rise in this anti-Black, very discriminatory acts. So it's disappointing, but I'm not surprised at all.
Yeah, I can definitely agree with what Carmen said. Not only was I sad, but I definitely just felt numb at first. It was something that I was like, here we are again on our campus, unfortunately. And I guess for me, I just really felt like this time, we couldn't just let it, we couldn't just let it go. We couldn't just, post it on Twitter and just, keep on moving and get upset because, it was just enough. Like Carmen said, since 2016, I would say even on this campus, there's just been, this kind of polarizing divide I can see. And so once that happened, I think we just all got to the point where we was like, this has to stop.
Yeah, I can completely agree with everything y'all are saying. Honestly, being a first year student here, first generation student as well. I came to UT, I guess thinking that people, obviously we're not ignorant. We don't think that people are just no racist people. People, aren't bigots. Who have these type of ideas, and even then, when I saw the picture, I wasn't necessarily shocked, but then I looked at the context. When you looked at the caption, when he pretty much said, "Now I'm Black, I'm gonna go to college for free." I feel like the problem really. I mean, it's crazy because I feel like the problem really relates into alleviating is ignorance. You have to understand that in the U.S., it does if you're in a public institution. If you're applying for a public institution, that they only look at your your standardized test scores and your GPA, nothing else. And it's how do we the problem is how do we get alleviate these notions? How do we change the way they're growing up? And we can't really do that. So I mean, it's a problem, ongoing problem.
No, I'd agree. I think I was scrolling through Twitter and seeing it, like I almost scrolled past it, and then I was like, oh gosh, you know, here we go again, you know, just kind of that disbelief approach at first, and then when I read the caption, that's when like the anger set in, because I was just like, are you kidding me? You know, like it's just like hit in your core, and I can like still like remember in the car when I saw it, and I just like kind of exploded with like who I was riding with, and I just couldn't believe that something like that would happen again on this campus, you know, because it wasn't the first instance this semester that had direct racial bias in it, you know. So
and plus like our tuition is not free, like not at all. I'm an Arkansas resident, and so you already know like my tuition is high. I don't get the Hope, I don't get any other scholarships like that. I'm paying out of pocket. My mom had to pick up an extra job as a speech pathologist just for me to come here. So right now I'm just only leaning on God and my GPA. That's it.
Amen.
and your hard work too.
Yeah.
Something that I think was like pretty unsettling for me was that the day prior, the day right before the picture was posted, we had several hundred students gathered at Friesen Black Cultural Center, marched together to Ayers to celebrate Black History Month. Cara was there, Carmen was there. I know most of you were there in spirit, but how did that make you feel to go from such a high the evening before to like an all-time low the next day?
I will say, because of course us three especially worked on Black History Month planning committee, and we worked on all these different projects and stuff, and it was just kind of like a smack in the face after you've done all that, uplifting your people. I know a lot of us here at the table do everything we can because representation is so important, and because we want to uplift our image or our narrative of what being Black on campus is. And when you have that and you're successful, and then somebody is like, oh, forget Black History Month. And the thing is, I don't even think February was over with when it was posted. I was like, you could have waited till March 1st. But you know, whatever. But yeah, so it was very disappointing. It was like a smack in the face.
Honestly, like just referring back to what you're saying, you know, all that work, you know, you have, as you said, you have the, you know, the gathering at the Friesen Black Center, and the day after you see these pictures of blackface. And, you know, I feel like just sort of, you know, reiterating it's really cultural backlash, you know, like it's almost as if like being a minority like at this university, as you like it really ostracizes you from everyone else, you know, like you can just see it, like you just walk around and like feel like the tension in the air. You can you breathe the tension, and like as a first year student, you know, really just coming to UT, I really did have this perception, you know, I'm reiterating what I was saying earlier, that, you know, that people here would be more open, you know, being at a university. But then you got to realize that, you know, the kids at the university are kids, you know, really from the state who grew up with these, you know, who grew up with these notions, you know, like, and it's hard to change, you know, like it's hard to keep being strong, you know, really, like when we see these type of actions occur, you know. Even though they might be like isolated actions, you know, may not represent, you know, obviously does not represent every single white male at the university, but there's still, you know, this subgroup of people who feel these type of ways, who are obviously, you know, being part of the silent majority, who have these, you know, have this angst against our well-being.
Yeah, I don't know. I would say it was interesting for me because, you know, when trying to get some people to participate in the march and things like that, it was really interesting when people were like, you know, I honestly don't want to come out for the Black History March just because, like, it doesn't really mean anything on this campus. And so, you know, to me, I was like, no, how dare you? Like, you know, we're supposed to be, like she said, like, we're supposed to be the face, the representation, like, we have to do this. And then so, you're right, less than 24 hours later, that pops up on Twitter, kind of was like, you know, can't really, you know, it's hard to bring people together and to really keep people's spirits high, you know, in wanting to be involved, wanting to have that spirit when, you know, so oftentimes on this campus, you know, we have the incidents on the Rock, you know, we have those, you know, ignorant incidences on Snapchat. And so it's just hard, you know, to even want to be here sometimes, I would say.
And it's hard to make students, like the average student care, the average white student care. That's really hard, and it's really hard in terms of like programming and doing things like that. Like you said, like when certain people don't want to come to events, and you're a part of that group or that minority group, it's like, come on, you can come to an MSL event. But I think this scenario kind of pushed us forward, but I hope that we don't take a step back because time has passed. I hope we don't come back after spring break and we're like, well, blackface is over, and then somebody else, another video pops up of somebody saying the N-word or whatever, or another white supremacist group comes on campus. Like, are we going to keep this fuel going? That's my question.
The situation really woke me up, because I'll be honest, I was one of those students who'd say, what is going to a march or what is doing this or that going to affect on this campus? What changes is it going to make? And with everything going on in my life individually, I realized you make time for what you want, right? And so when we make it relevant for white students on campus and people who think it has nothing to do with them, we make it relevant for them to participate, that's when it'll happen. Prime example, the protest at the game, right? We had a very diverse crowd, I'd say, a good mixture of students from different backgrounds. And that was from us pushing that, right? From pushing that, driving it home that this is not okay. So even in small instances, it's about what we do and how we make other people feel about it. Because at the end of the day, we're the students on the campus and we need to get more people involved and make them understand that this will affect everybody, whether you're a minority or not, because tensions will arise on campus.
When you hear a younger student like Fife describe like the pain and sorrow that he's already feeling within his second semester on campus, especially since he's a younger black male, like what do you say to people like that when they're feeling that way, Garrett?
Be strong. Be strong as a black male. The reality is the country wasn't built for us to run it. This campus wasn't made for us to come here. We're already beating the odds now, so just be as strong as you've been to this point, you know? So, I mean, just by you being here, doing what you're doing now, a first-generational college student, you've done the hardest part. You've done the hardest part. But it means a lot for you to get up here and say now, to speak up on injustices like this when other people just sit at home like I did my freshman and sophomore year. I was not worried at all about those instances that happen on campus, right? But you have the wherewithal and the courage to speak up for what you believe in, just to keep doing that.
And thank you for that, you know. And that, as you said, you know, we have to be strong when we face adversity, because when your back's against the wall, you know, you're not facing only two choices. You know, it's not you either got to fight or you know you're gonna succumb to it. And like, you know, I realized just growing up, you know, my parents being immigrants from Nigeria, I was raised to always be strong, to always like every time there's a problem, you have to overcome the problem, find solutions to it. And like, you know, I feel like, you know, I've been brainstorming on like possible solutions or possible ways to at least make the campus more open, to at least force people to be exposed to these things. And for example, when I was in first year council, as the FYS, first year studies, I guess, board came in to talk to us about, you know, about their program and things, their initiatives they're doing to like help, you know, alleviate diversity. And I posed a serious question. They said they're making it mandatory for kids who are taking the FYS 101 class, which only a third of first year students take the course. And I take a 1 hour course on diversity and inclusion. And I was saying that usually kids who are doing the blackface, kids who are painting these, you know, who are painting these obscenities on the rock, they're not the ones taking that course. So what is the, like, even as just students coming into their first year, how do you make it mandatory for at least all of these students to take this course, at least to expose them to like these concepts of diversity and inclusion?
I think that's something, Cara, Maddie, and I are seniors and have been asking that question for 4 years. What are y'all's thoughts? Like how do we get people to care that don't engage in those conversations typically?
Something I've noticed is just kind of like leaning into being uncomfortable, you know? So like those people that we're trying to reach that maybe don't agree with it or aren't as educated or just like disengage with like the whole entire concept behind diversity and inclusion, like being brave enough to just kind of like challenge them in a conversation, whether that's like in the classroom, whether it's at, you know, a social event that you're at or a party or an organization meeting. That's something that I've noticed, like if I can build enough rapport with you like in class or like just in a casual setting, like maybe just like on a whim the conversation will steer that way one day. Or when, you know, big triggers like this happen, like it's easy for me to just kind of be like, okay, like wake up here for a minute.
You've got that foundation.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's like one small thing, but I mean, there's obviously a ton more that needs to be done and like on an institutional level for us, but on a day by day, like that's what it looks like for me at least.
Yeah, I actually couldn't agree more. I think kind of going off what Garrett said, like once I continue to kind of grow in myself and say, what can I do to help? You know, like I joined Diversity Educators and really took it upon myself to not only say like, who am I what is my identity as a Black woman, but what are all these other identities mean and how do they intersect on a day-to-day level? And I think once you take the time to do that, I think you realize, one, that's something that's very important. I think that's something that everyone needs to do, is because there's just so often times that there's just cultural misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I think that's just what our problem is here, is that I don't think these people are, you know, purposely, you know, out to get us or out to say, you know, I'm going to wake up this morning and be a racist. I think it's truly just ignorance. And like, you know, Maddie was saying, it starts with those day-to-day conversations, you know, just, I remember like when we protested, people were like, why would you do this during the basketball game? And very angry that, you know, we were disturbing their game.
Yeah.
And my question kind of to them was, did you even ask, you know, what was the issue here? Why are they upset? And I think it starts there for sure.
Yeah.
And when you were talking about like being at the game and doing that, I think it frustrates me when Black students, like we are our only voice to a certain extent, but like it kind of frustrates me because white people and because UT loves sports and they love our Black athletes and they love to sit there and kind of like objectify these Black bodies for like doing all these fantastic things and winning games and stuff. But it's like, okay, you're proud of Black men playing sports, but you're not proud when these Black students are out here and trying to like live their best lives, because I don't think they understand that like it takes an emotional toll on athletes, Black athletes, and I'm sure you can speak more on that, but it takes the toll on the Black student as a whole, not just athletes, not just the students, but just stepping into that space. And also when me and Dalton were walking up the stairs, after the stairs that I got, I like from these people, it was scary. It was scary. And I can only imagine with my grandmother and my great-grandmother being from Mississippi, I can only imagine that feeling of being surrounded by white people and being afraid. So
I'm smiling because I'm kind of piggybacking off of what you said. You recruit these guys, these girls, right, to play a sport, run, jump, catch the ball, put it in the hoop. You're extremely proud of what they can do for your university, athletics-wise, right? But when it comes to actually standing up for something that truly matters, right? Something that'll be here long after a sport and long after that player is retired, you don't want to stand up for it. And with these things happening on campus, the first thing that hit me, the first question that entered my mind was, what students have the most influence on campus? Athletes, right? In the world, who has the most influence, right? Celebrities, performers, athletes. And until those celebrities and athletes in the world speak up, oftentimes issues don't even get addressed, right? So if Beyonce tweets out right now anything about the University of Tennessee campus, there will be a lot of heat on this campus, right? So if you take the people with the most influence, for whatever reason, and you encourage them to stand up to their problem and voice it, it impacts the campus differently, right? So we saw a couple athletes sitting with us at the protest, right? And a lot of people looked and say, oh, that's so-and-so, or that's so-and-so, right? And now people are wondering, now that's still sitting with them because they know that person through athletics. So when people see athletes, it kind of hits home differently for them.
Yeah, I think we saw that at Mizzou a few years ago. When their football players spoke out against the racism that was happening on campus, things began to change a lot quicker than what it had been any time before that.
Well, can I ask a question?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, Garrett, what do you say, though, because kind of going back to what even Maddie was talking about on an institutional level, you know, I think it can sometimes be tough to step out of that comfort zone of saying, I came here to play football, or I came here to play, or I came here to run, and I'm just trying to get out of this system and, you know, make it for me and my family. What do you say when you know, like, this is just for a year, so they know, you know, I can just, like I said, like, I'm at the point where I'm like, I can just get my degree and get out of here.
I've heard the whole "it's 4 years" thing a lot in the past few weeks.
Yeah, everyone's like, I've heard degree me, #degree me, like you know, just let it be over with. So what do you say, you know, just kind of juggling that, you know, between being an athlete, you know, attempting this career and wanting to be a student activist?
Right. Well, for one, I address the fact that I'm a walk-on. I don't understand the exact position that you're in as a scholarship athlete, with your scholarship possibly being on the line. That's the first thing I address. So I'm not you, and I don't want to be you, but I want you to understand this. It's 4 years, right? It isn't just 4 years, it's the rest of your life. When you leave here and you go to the NFL, if those are your hopes and dreams, you'll still have to deal with this. Look at Colin Kaepernick. Why do you think, I said this to an athlete and I hope he sees this. Why do you think that when Colin Kaepernick and Eric Reed got that money from the NFL, they didn't disclose the amount?
Are you talking about with the most recent settlement?
Right, with the most recent settlement, why do you think the NFL did not disclose that amount?
I don't know.
They probably got a whole lot of money, right? They probably did. And they spoke out on something that other people weren't willing to. And at the end, obviously they can't play. They couldn't play football, get signed to a team. But if money was the issue, if taking care of your family was the issue, that's a great example of how standing up for the right thing comes back around positively. So,
I think sometimes the things we forget is like we are the conversation starters, and so we might not see the change that happens on campus, but even moments like this are like the beginning of long-term systemic changes, which is what we've got to hope for. So when we begin to think about change that's long-term and systemic that will actually last on campus, what does that look like? What are the moments that are going to give us hope for the future?
I believe it looks, I mean, even though I'm only, you know, I have a limited perspective compared, you know, to y'all have been on campus longer, but I believe that it's through mobilization. You know, I feel like we need student athletes, as you said, influential people on campus. We need people who are involved in SGA, people who are, you know, who are in the ears of the administration. We need people who represent every facet of the university. We need to come together and mobilize. Like I feel like the best way to enact change would be that, like, instead of us trying to appeal to the system, I feel like the best way is that once we get a lot of people together who rally behind the same cause, that you cannot ignore the majority. You know, you can't ignore the majority. You can't ignore the power of the people. So
I think too, like, it's small wins, you know, like that's just kind of like, especially through all of this, is like what I've been holding on to is like those small wins that actually like, you saw a moment of like, oh my gosh, this is what this could be. Like the celebration for Black Excellence Dinner this year. Like that was one of those small wins where it was like, we started Black History Month, like programming in general is only a year old. So, you know, like Mickey Curtis like brought that to us, and like we kind of just like scrambled to get it together again this year. But we got it together, and it was better than the year before. And it's just like, that's one small step, but it's happening, and we're on the second annual, and next year we're gonna have a third annual. Like that's something that, you know, and it opens up like line of communication too. So even like in response to this crisis situation with the blackface photo, like communication between SGA and some other groups, and like between multicultural student life and like all of these different organizations has skyrocketed just this month in response to this, and like maintaining that momentum, that's huge. Trying to find a way to, like, even though it was catalyzed by something that we're not proud of, like how can we keep that energy year long, you know?
Kind of a popcorn question that I want everyone to answer before we wrap up is, given all the trials and tribulations and challenges that you face every day when you wake up as a Black student at UT, for those of you who are juniors and seniors, what is it that makes you stay? What makes you proud to be a Black student at the University of Tennessee? Because I know at times they can seem like something that's not parallel, but something has made y'all stay. Something has gotten y'all committed. So what is that something?
I would say that's something for me, because my freshman year I didn't take it as seriously as I should have in terms of my academics, but it honestly took me like failing some classes, just being honest, and also realizing that my grandmother and just this line of history of my family, they didn't get that same opportunity that I have to go to a predominantly white institution, get a good education, be able to actually take classes that relate to who you are. And so taking those, I can't take that opportunity for granted. And so when I walk into my class, I'm like, I'm doing this for my grandmother, for my great-grandfather, all of these people before me, because our history has been tainted by a lot of horrible things. And I feel like every generation should get better and better. We should progress.
Yeah, for me, I would definitely say it's been the community of people I've met here. I would say that I think I can go anywhere and get a good quality education if I, strive for it. I think I could have gone here, could have gone to Spelman and HBCU where my mother went. It wouldn't have mattered. But I know that the people I've met here and the relationships I've formed, whether it be my friends, via faculty, my mentors, I wouldn't want to change that. I wouldn't go anywhere else, because I think this also teaches us so much about the real world. It's what's driven me to get my passion for education and equity. And so if I hadn't gone here, I don't know if I would still be on that path. So.
Yeah.
My thought process too is like, if you leave, you can't change the narrative, And so growing up in Knoxville, like, the Vols are everything. I grew up in love with them. I watched football every Saturday, like, born and raised, like, bleed orange. And if I leave, then like, if I want to change, like, the definition of what volunteer is, like, I have to be here to do that. And so, like, that's kind of what has kept me grounded, like, even through some of these more difficult instances.
Fife, Garrett, what keeps y'all here?
Well, it meant something to me. Coming to the University of Tennessee just meant a lot to me. And to also get out of my comfort zone. I could have easily went to an HBCU, love HBCUs, but it meant something to me to get completely out of my comfort zone and come here with intentions on studying medicine, pre-med, and to go to a school that was 90% white and get comfortable with how things would be. This isn't the first instance of a sign of racism on the University of Tennessee's campus, right? Yeah. So to know that, to accept it and say, you know what, I'm up for the challenge, and nothing will stop me from getting what I came here for.
Exactly. Well, to rebuttal, or at least to go off what he's saying, it's hard. It's hard. To continue. Like, I've also had my doubts. I've thought, what am I doing here after X, Y, Z happens? You're thinking, why am I still here? And two weeks ago, we went to the State of the State, or I went to the State of the State address in Nashville. We talked to legislators, and I met a legislative assistant named Malik Gay. And when I was talking to him, he gave me the upfront truth about, like, the reality of the political system, and especially in regards to African Americans as a super minority, and saying, like, even though the fate may look grim, he gave me a lot of inspiration, because he said that although the fight is there and it's great and the challenges are massive, he's saying that I'm still going to persevere and do what I can and do my part and try to change it. So, I after that, like, after hearing that, I adopted that for, ideology, his ideology, and I'm saying, like, really, as you're saying, you have to stay strong. The black man have to be strong. And the reason why I'm going to stay is that, if I leave, I'm a coward, because I'm running away from challenges, and we cannot run away from challenges. Sometimes you have to stand up to it, look it square in the eye, and overcome it.
Absolutely. Y'all, I appreciate you so much for coming to the table, sharing your stories, and being vulnerable with each of you. I think that conversations like this are what's going to take the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, to a better place. And so hopefully we can carry out this conversation that happened at the Orange Table and keep having them in other places. But thanks, y'all, so much.
Thank you. Yeah.